Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday, April 27th, 2021 regular business meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. Due to COVID-19 and in accordance with the latest Alameda County Health Order and with the Governor's Executive Order N-2920, which suspends portions of the Brown Act, this meeting will be conducted remotely. In compliance with said orders, a physical location has not been provided for this meeting. These measures will only apply during the period in which state or local public health officials have imposed or recommended social distancing. The Sustainability, Energy, and the Finance Administration Committees met this morning and will report out under item 15. All directors, including myself, are participating by teleconference. Madam Secretary, will you please call roll?
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Katz.
Present.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Mellon.
Present.
Director Patterson.
Present.
Director Young.
I'm here.
President Lenny.
Here. So please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance now. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States
of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have a presentation. General Manager Clifford Chan, please make the presentation.
Thank you, President Lenny. So the wastewater treatment plant virtual tour program received the 2021 National Environmental Achievement Award for Public Information and Education from the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. Since 2016, the district has offered the popular in-person tour program to educate the public on wastewater treatment processes and its role in protecting public health in the San Francisco Bay. In spring 2020, when in-person tours were suspended due to the pandemic, staff quickly mobilized to develop a live virtual tour experience. The Transform Tour program has been wildly successful. This new format has allowed the district to reach a broader, larger, and multilingual audience. Virtual tours offer many benefits. Group sizes are no longer limited, minimum age requirements are lifted, geographic or transportation constraints are removed, and the carbon footprint of driving to the main wastewater treatment plant is eliminated. The tours are popular with local school groups participating in online learning, and virtual tours are offered in Spanish, Cantonese, and American Sign Language. Together, these changes have allowed the tour program attendance to more than double from just under 1,000 participants in the past few years to approximately 2,500 in 2020. The district will continue virtual tours as pandemic restrictions subside, and the lessons learned from the virtual tours will be incorporated into future in-person tours. The tour program is made possible by dedicated, enthusiastic staff. In particular, I'd like to thank and congratulate the following team members who are instrumental in developing and leading the virtual tours in 2020. Kristen Font, Wastewater Control Representative. Phoebe Groh, Supervising Wastewater Control Representative. James Hake, Associate Civil Engineer. Kevin Jim, Associate Civil Engineer. Jennifer Koo, Associate Civil Engineer. Matilda Leong, Senior Administrative Clerk. Rebecca Overacre, Associate Civil Engineer, and Sarah Plummer, Assistant Engineer. Please join us in congratulating the team.
Thank you, Clifford. This is one of those things that with the pandemic could have gone either way. We could have just shut it down and said, oh, well, we'll wait till the pandemic is over. But for our staff to have come up with this idea and to develop a virtual tour that not only increases the participation, but also, as we've seen with the tour we've been given, really is an opportunity to give, in some ways, a more in-depth tour that way. And so we're very proud of our staff for coming up with this. Continues to keep EBMUD in the forefront of innovation and an example for other utilities. So thank you very much, everyone, for doing this, and very proud to be getting this award on the behalf of all the work that you've done. On to, there were no announcements from closed session. We're on to public comment. If members of the public wish to speak on an agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. And we split this into comments on non-agenda items, so things that are not on the agenda for today, but the public wants to make a comment to the board on, are heard at the beginning of the meeting. And then comments on agenda items will be heard as each item is up for consideration. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation if applicable, and topic. The secretary will call each speaker in the order received. You will get 3 minutes. However, I have discretion to amend this if there's a large number of speakers. The secretary will track the time and inform each speaker when the allotted time has concluded. Do we have any speakers?
We have
public
one
comment?
speaker, and it's with a phone number ending in 1225. And you should be able to unmute your mic. Okay.
Hi there. My name is Heinrich Albert. I'm co-chair of the Sierra Club Bay Chapter Water Committee. I would like to you folks on item 11.2.
Excuse me, Mr. Albert, you said you want to comment on item 11?
Item 11.2, correct.
Okay,
All right,
so
so we'll come back to you.
Thank you.
When we get to that item. Thank you. Any others?
there are no other speakers for public comment.
Okay. Then let's go to the consent calendar. I'd like to pull item 10. Any other items that need to be pulled for discussion?
I would move the remainder.
I'll second.
Motion by Director McIntosh, seconded by, who is it seconded by?
I think Bill.
Bill, all right, thank you. Seconded by Director Patterson. All in favor? We will do a roll call vote.
Right. Director Coleman? You're on mute.
Yes.
Director Katz?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Mellon?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
Yes.
Director Young?
Yes.
And President Lenny?
Yes. All right, so that carries unanimously. Item 10, Clifford, I think you wanted to make a comment on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to let the board know that yesterday you should have received by email from the Secretary of District last minute change to policy 1.12 on the prevailing wage. There were changes to the language and the scope. I will note that the Finance Administration Committee did unanimously accept the report. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention before you voted on it.
All right, any questions on that?
I would move the item.
Second.
Okay, so moved by Director McIntosh, seconded by Director Patterson. Secretary, will you please call the vote?
Director Coleman?
Yes.
Director Katz?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Mellon?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
Yes.
Director Young?
Oops, yes.
President Lenny?
Yes. All right, that motion carries. We're on to determination and discussion. First item is item 11, dealing with water supply availability and deficiency report.
Yeah, so let me just say, as you mentioned, President Lenny, first is our 2021 Water Supply Availability and Deficiency Report. In accordance with District Policy 9.03, we prepare and file our annual Water Supply Availability and Deficiency Report, which evaluates the adequacy of our water supplies. As the board is aware, the McCallum watershed this year is tracking to be the second driest on record behind 1977, and in the East Bay, it's the driest on record. Unfortunately, the rain over the weekend did little to change our water supply situation. In fact, we received less than forecasted, and our median projection for total system storage is less than what is shown in your report, coming in at 490,000 acre-feet instead of 500,000 acre-feet. So we have two reports for determination discussion under this item, and we'll address each one separately. The first is the water supply availability and deficiency report, and the second is the declaration of a stage 1 drought. Lena Tam, Manager of Water Resources Planning, will present the first report, and Mike Tognolini, Director of Water and Natural Resources, will present the second report. At this point, I'll hand it over to Lena.
Thank you, Clifford. As the general manager mentioned, at this time every year, the board makes findings on the adequacy of our water supply to meet the needs of our customers, environmental flows, and McCallum River downstream water users. The district has over 120 water rights agreements, court decrees, and settlement agreements with several agencies on the McCallum, along with the state and federal government. These agreements have stipulated deadlines that rely on today's water supply availability and deficiency report. Next slide, please. The findings on the adequacy of our water supply are based on the current water supply projections, applicable state regulations and contractual obligations under a myriad of different water rights agreements, some that are dating back to the 1930s. Next, please. Starting with our hydrology, for the past 10 months, the rainfall in the McCallum Basin have been significantly below average, with the exception of January. And as the general manager mentioned, the rains that we had on Sunday brought about 0.6 of an inch, bringing the month of April to about 0.9, way below average. And overall, we are at 54% of average, and we have no further precipitation in sight. Next, please. Rainfall in the East Bay watershed has actually been worse. We've got a bit of a drizzle that amounted to almost no rainfall in April, resulting in the East Bay being the driest year on record. Next, please. In the McCallum watershed, it's looking like we will be seeing the second driest year on record based on a 90% exceedance, one that assumes that our late season precipitation will be drier than 90% of the years in our historical record. We have had some early storms, but the weather has become progressively drier, and the prospects of drought relief are not looking very good. Next, please. Our total system storage currently in the McCallum and the East Bay are about 85% of average and about 2/3 full. Next, please. As Clifford mentioned, our total system storage came in lower than we had expected. We calculate our total system storage based on what we currently have in storage. We add the projected runoff, and we subtract customer demands and all of our contractual obligations on the McCallum. And based on yesterday's estimates, when the rains did not quite materialize, our total system storage dropped by about 10,000 acre-feet from these estimates that you see currently here, with the 50% exceedance now at 490,000 acre-feet instead of 500, and a 90% exceedance at 465 instead of 475. Thank you. Next, please. As you've seen in the news, drought concerns are emerging at the regional and at the state level. The federal and the state government have been responding to the dry conditions. The Bureau informed us that the allocations for municipal industrial contractors like EBMUD would be 55% of our historical use. And we received a letter from the State Water Resources Control Board asking us to take actions in responding to dry conditions and alerting us to potential state actions if drought conditions persist. The state could issue a curtailment notice similar to what they did in 2014, requiring water right holders like EBMUD to cease all diversions. But it would require a declaration of a drought emergency from Governor Newsom. And so far, he has done that for Sonoma and Mendocino counties, but not at the state level yet. Next, please. So at this time, based on our projected runoff and our total system storage under the Department of Water Resources Bulletin 120, which serves as the legal basis for the fishery flows and the allocation of water for the other irrigation districts on the McElmy River, the runoff is projected to be about 325,000 acre feet as of April 1st, which is designated as a dry year under our joint settlement agreement, and our fishery flows will be based on dry year conditions. As of April 26, our median runoff is now around 280,000 acre feet, which puts us in a critically dry conditions. But our JSA releases are based on the state's estimate that occurred and was published on April 8th. Next, please. So based on the water supply projections, the environmental flows from the Comanche for fishery protection will be based on dry year type conditions. Woodbridge Irrigation District will get their minimum base supply of 39,000 acre feet instead of 60. Jackson Valley Irrigation District will be receiving their allocation of 3,850 acre feet. And North San Joaquin Water Conservation District, the most junior water right holder on the McElmy, will receive no water this year. And based on our current projections, we will have no surplus water available. Next, please. Then this graphic shows our demand pattern since the last drought about 7 years ago. Our customers have continued to use water wisely, and our water consumption has actually not fully rebounded to 2013 levels of 160 million gallons per day. Last year, our average water use was around 146 MGD, which was slightly higher than the year before, but still not back up to the 167 MGD. The district has already met the state mandated water conservation goal of reducing our urban per capita water use by 20% in the year 2020. And we're well on our way to meeting the new targets of 50 gallons per capita per day by the year 2030. Next, please. To determine whether water supplies are sufficient, we calculate whether we have enough storage to meet our customers' needs, our downstream obligations, and our projected demands, and to have enough carryover for the next year. The Drought Management Program guidelines, which I'll go over next, sets a range of thresholds to reflect the adequacy of our carryover storage. And based on current projections, we are in the range of declaring a stage 1 drought under our guidelines. Next, please. As a refresher, the district has developed a water shortage contingency plan that's required by law, and it includes these existing drought management program guidelines. The district is one of the few water agencies in the state that actually integrates water conservation into our water supply planning. We rely on water savings from our customers as a source of supply, particularly for the environment. The projected total system storage levels that trigger each stage ensures that we can meet our customer demands, provide adequate flows for fisheries and downstream senior water right holders, and that we will have enough available in the following year if the drought continues. If our total system storage falls below 500,000 acre feet, we would be asking our customer for some level of reduction, up to 15%. This is under our current guidelines. Next, please. So we're currently updating the urban water management plan that is in circulation for public review. And we're proposing to modify our drought management guidelines to reflect the lessons learned from the 2014 to 15 drought, when we operated Freeport for the first time in real world conditions, and we faced many new challenges. We also wanted to give credit to the water savings that our customers have already achieved. During the last drought, we ran into a number of unanticipated events that affected our water supply. We faced like unprecedented reductions in water allocations from the Bureau. It was like 50% in 2014, and 25% in 2015. We faced curtailments on the McElmy River by the State Water Board. Dry year water became very expensive. Instead of paying what at that time was $50 an acre foot for our CVP supplies, we were buying water on the spot market for the tune of $500 to $700 an acre foot. We also faced statewide mandatory water reductions of 20 to 25%. So this time around, we want to be better prepared to manage risk to our customers' water supply reliability by bringing in supplemental water supplies at stage 1 when our total system storage reaches 475,000 acre feet instead of waiting to 450,000 acre feet, and asking our customers for mandatory reductions when we're at 425,000 acre feet instead of 390. Whether we rely on our current guidelines or the proposed new guidelines, since our total system storage will be below 500,000 acre feet, we would be implementing stage 1 drought response actions, which Mike Tognolini will discuss later under item 11.2. Next, please. To summarize, staff recommends that the board makes the finding that we will be operating under drier conditions to meet our flow obligations on the McElmy River, and that after meeting these obligations, water supplies are not sufficient for meeting customer demands. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Director Katz? Oh, sorry, I saw your hand. Nope, my mistake.
John, go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much, President Linney and Lena. Great presentation. I mean, consider what we're facing, but thank you. It was very factual. Could you walk us through, or is Mike going to walk us through? You talked about the purchasing, perhaps buying water in terms of the stage we're in. What happened last drought when the state came through and imposed conditions on being able to get water, and what the impact was on our customers in terms of cutbacks and costs?
So we were having to buy water on the spot market in 2014 for 15, and we were having to compete with a number of water users and other contractors that were on the transfer market. So we were paying like almost more than 10 times what we normally would be paying under our current contract with the Bureau of Reclamation. And we were allocated only 25% of our contract amount in the last drought. And our customers actually came through with a lot of the ordinances that the board had basically put in place that ended up reducing our water use by almost like 23%.
Okay, and that's one reason today we're actually in relatively good shape, that our usage hasn't gone back to what it was in 2013. Have you seen, have you heard, or has Mike heard, or Clifford or anybody? I've read a little bit how some entities in Southern California want to go out and buy a lot of water now up in the North Sacramento Valley. So it's obviously going to get potentially more competitive and more expensive on the open market, but we have our agreements in place. I guess I'm saying it. I'd personally rather just be conservative and buy and not have to pay 10 times the amount down the road if we get into that category of need. And yes, we may end up not needing it next year. We don't know. I don't know. That's just a comment. I guess it's not it's a comment, not a question. Sorry, Lena.
It's okay. I think Mike will go into more details about that in his presentation.
Thank you.
Any other questions of board members at this point?
So I still am finding some trouble understanding how the calculations back us up into modifying stage 1 to begin at 475 and which I think is helpful if that is only limited to the way we encourage our customers to conserve more in a quantitative way. But if we're coupling it with the Freeport activation decision, I would like to have really a very clear understanding of our hydrology patterns, our consumption patterns, and I still am lacking that information.
I can go over that part of the drought management program guidelines again, or we can wait until Mike discusses it in more detail in the context of bringing in supplemental supplies.
Did you want to cover it a bit, Lena, first right now?
I can. Risha, would you help me go to slide 13, please?
One moment, we're bringing it up.
And if this is supposed to be presented in a different order, then that's fine. I'm not sure what the order of the presentation.
It's okay. You'll see the same graphics in his presentation, but we can go over it now. So these are our current guidelines, and we set the stage at 500,000 acre feet because that is stipulated in our contract with the Bureau of Reclamation, that anytime our total system storage, this includes Pardee, Comanche, and our East Bay reservoirs, fall below 500,000 acre feet, we have the option of exercising our contract with the Bureau. Based on our current guidelines, if we are falling below 500, we would also ask for voluntary conservation between 0 and 15%. And based on the lessons learned, Risha, would you go to slide 14, please? We are proposing that we would move that stage to looking at securing supplemental supplies at stage 1 between a total system storage of 425,000 acre feet to 475,000 acre feet for the reasons we talked about earlier, based on the lessons we learned from the last drought.
Andy, does that answer your question for the time being?
I'm no, but I mean, I think we should proceed. But I mean, I think I've asked for kind of a specific. I understand what's being proposed, but I don't understand why this is adequate based on our hydrology and consumption patterns.
Okay. We are looking at a stage 1 when we are looking at 0 to 10% of voluntary rationing. This gives the district the flexibility of basically crediting our customers for the conservation that they've achieved to date, because we have learned from the last drought that our customers have often exceeded our expectations when we ask for a certain level of customer reductions. So we want that flexibility to allow for voluntary rationing if we have to take in a certain quantity of supplemental supplies to have our carryover storage be adequate for the following year.
And Lena, maybe I'll also add, what we also, when we put together the original plan, we assumed that we would get a certain amount of water from the Bureau. And what we learned from the drought, so when you're asking like the hydrology patterns, is if we wait too long, that water won't be available. And so we've changed the triggers to take Freeport earlier with the understanding that from the last drought, we can be cut back severely. And that wasn't the original assumption when we put together the plan. So this is, it's important for us to look at our plans, but it's also important to look at what actually happened. And what actually happened was we didn't get the water that we thought we would get. And so we were modifying the plan to take the water sooner. And that was a very big lesson learned from the last drought.
In addition to paying a lot more for it too, per acre foot.
Yeah.
And I guess a question sort of related to this, but not. We're looking at this is going a little left field, maybe, right field, whatever. Los Vaqueros expansion, and we've had discussions as they do their expansion, as they reduce their capacity of having them, that they would be able to get some of the water that we would normally have. How does this come into play, and when, if that were to happen? It's not in 2021, I don't think, but down the road, how does that sequentially come into play in terms of the drought we're facing today, and potentially down the road of working with Concost Water District in terms of using some of our water for their customers as they drop their capacity in Los Vaqueros?
We'll have Mike respond to that.
Sure. Integrate an enlarged Los Vaqueros storage element into our long-term water supply plan. Something we've talked a little bit about in our long-term water supply workshops on an annual basis, but conceptually, the program would have to be integrated with operation of Freeport. Typically, Freeport is a lower cost alternative, and we would rely on Freeport in the early years of a drought when water is available and when we can obtain it at a lower price. And then that can be supplemented with storage from Los Vaqueros. If East Bay MUD were to decide to participate in that project, we could supplement that supply with additional supplies from that reservoir when the time comes in. Remember that we're planning our long-term water supply out to the year 2050 right now, as identified in our urban water management plan. So we're identifying what elements of our program, supplemental supplies in a diverse water supply portfolio, need to be in place to meet our customers' water supply reliability needs out to the year 2050, including the possibility of participating in Los Vaqueros.
So Mike, the question is, if we're to participate, and when would the year be if that happens, where the need for water out of Freeport may come into play in terms of them CCWD receiving Freeport water, and we need to make sure that we're also, we need to work with our neighbors, but at the same time, making sure we're not putting a limit on our ability to take if we need to take.
Yes. So we, in working with the partners of the Los Vaqueros project, have identified that there may be the possibility for other partners to utilize our Freeport project to move water into Los Vaqueros, typically in wet years, wet and normal years. East Bay MUD is reserving its dry year capacity in Freeport entirely for itself. There are times and there are years where East Bay MUD does not need to fully use all of its dry year capacity in Freeport, and on a case-by-case basis, there may be opportunities for others to use that capacity. But when you look at long-term planning and you look at any commitments that the district would make, we would not be in a position to make commitments of our dry year Freeport capacity. That is reserved for our own customers first, and if we are not using it, we could make it potentially available to others.
Okay, let me be more direct. If Los Vaqueros expansion happens, when is the need for CCWD's water from Freeport? I know it's not in 2021 or 2022. I just want to make sure as we're entering a drought that we're not putting a limitation on what we may need to use.
Got it. Yeah, the construction of the Los Vaqueros project is going to take a number of years, 5 years or more, and would not anticipate a need to move water through Freeport until the end of this decade, the late 2020s or 2030.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Thank you.
At this point, let me suggest that we go on to the next presentation. And thank you, Lena. Why don't you obviously stand by for any further questions?
And maybe just for the report itself, President Lenny, if
except item 10.
The actions for this particular item is for us to accept and file the report. And because our projections are below 500,000 acre feet, and we're in stage 1, by definition, our water supply is deficient. And if we can take actions on that one first, that will help with the discussion for 11.2.
I'll move item 10.
I'm sorry, item 11, 1.1. Is that correct, John?
I'm sorry, yes, item 11.1. I was looking at the wrong number on my screen. Yes, 11.1.
Okay.
Sorry.
And do I have a second for that? Frank?
Second.
I think I saw Frank's finger there.
Before we act on that, can I ask a clarifying question? Does this, what's the current status of the proposed drought management program guidelines? Does this item adopt the new bans for stages 0 through 4?
No, it does not. The current urban water management plan, which includes the drought management program guidelines, is being circulated for public review, and it will come to the board on May 11th at that hearing for adoption. But so far, today's report is just based on our water supply conditions and our compliance with our existing contracts and our obligations, and making sure that other water users know that we have made a finding that we are in dry year conditions and that our water supplies are deficient for our customers.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So we have a motion and a second for item number 11.1 to approve or accept the report, the water supply availability and deficiency report in conformance with district policy 9.03. Madam Secretary, will you please call roll?
Yes, just want to confirm the motion was Director Coleman and second was Director Mellon?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Director Coleman?
Yes.
Director Katz?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Mellon?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
Yes.
Director Young?
Yes.
President Linney?
Yes.
Okay, so next we have Mike Tognolini, who will talk about, have discussion on the Stage 1 drought declaration and our drought response actions.
Good afternoon, President Linney and members of the board. Go to the next slide, please. Slide 2. We'll be discussing today drought management response items, including these 4 bullets, possible actions by the board, all under one resolution. Declare a Stage 1 drought, declare the need to use the Freeport project to deliver Central Valley Project water, declare a need for voluntary district-wide water use reduction goal of up to 10%, and authorize further water conservation measures consistent with the Stage 1 drought declaration. And I'm going to walk through each of these in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. As the board just determined, the district's water supply is not sufficient for meeting customer demands and storage targets after meeting flow obligations in the lower McKellamie River. And the projected runoff equates to dry year conditions for our joint settlement agreement on the lower McKellamie. Next slide. These are, again, the end of September water storage projections that you heard previously. These are from last week, and as both the general manager and Lena have mentioned, they've been decreased because the storm that came in on Sunday was not as much precipitation as anticipated. So currently our 50% exceedance projection is for 490,000 acre feet of storage. 90% exceedance is 465, and the 99% exceedance is for, is 450. The district all season has been trending drier than the 90% exceedance, and based on climatic conditions and the forecast looking at the next 15 days in which no rain is forecast, it's appropriate for the board to consider using the 90% exceedance to declare the Stage 1 drought. Next slide. Slide 5 you just saw from Lena's presentation. I would just say that this is the current drought management program guideline in place. It's in the process of being updated, as has been discussed. What's important for the board to understand is these are guidelines for the board to consider. And the board has discretion to take into account both the current and the proposed guidelines in determining what stage of drought the board wishes to declare at this point. So I'll move on to the next slide. And again, Lena did a really good job of explaining our lessons learned, what we learned from the last drought. CVP supplies are less reliable than we had anticipated they would be. Our allocation was reduced from 50% in 2014 to 25% in 2015. The 25% was beyond anything we had planned for. So as a result of that, we didn't obtain as much CVP water in 2015, and then we had to turn to the water transfer market. And that's where, as Lena pointed out, we were paying up to $700 an acre foot for water that would have otherwise cost less than $100 an acre foot from the CVP if we had obtained it the previous year. So the lesson learned was that even with stable demands, the district should access supplemental supplies earlier in a drought when they are available and less expensive. And the proposed DMP guidelines reflect the experience of that previous drought. Next slide. Slide 7, which you've also seen before. I just want to highlight the different stages of drought. Stage 0, of course, would be that we are not declaring a drought. Stage 1 is what we are proposing for consideration today, a moderate drought, really the initial stages. And what you're trying to achieve in a stage 1 declaration is to really take some initial actions now that would reduce the threat of stage 2, 3, or 4 next year. So these are some early actions that we can take, reasonable actions that we believe we can take to do the most we can to prepare for next year in the event that it is also dry. Stage 2 would be a significant drought with mandatory rationing implemented. Stage 3 would be a severe drought, again with mandatory rationing, and stage 4, a critical drought with mandatory rationing in excess of our target of 15% possibly. And again, as Lena mentioned, the differences between the current and the proposed drought management plan guidelines most significantly are that we would operate Freeport at a storage projection of 475 instead of 450, and mandatory rationing at 425 instead of 390 total system storage. Next slide. Oh. We should be on slide 8. There we go. Thank you. All right, so stage 1 response actions. The first proposal would be to divert up to 58,000 acre feet of CVP water from our Freeport project. That results in a supply increase of 46,000 acre feet due to our gain sharing provisions. That additional cost would be approximately $25 to $30 million in operational costs and costs of the water itself. We have identified that by using the SMUD green energy tariff for facilities that are supplied power by SMUD, which would be the Freeport intake and the Clay Station pumping plant, that we can achieve the district's 2021 greenhouse gas emission goal at a very low cost. We will need to confirm our contract eligibility by May 1st. That is the deadline to submit our schedule for diversion of water at Freeport under the CVP, but it's not a firm commitment. We can schedule that water on May 1st and decide later that we don't need to take as much or not take any at all. That's still available to us down the road here. We do need to provide a 60-day advance notice to SMUD to activate Freeport. So in our recommendation here, which would be to operate Freeport in the late summer, we would be looking to notify SMUD in June in order to operate Freeport by August. By early June, we'll have updated storage projections, and essentially you have the 50%, the 90%, the 99%, all the projections as you move to the end of the rainfall year by early June. Those projections are all going to start to converge on a single number. So we'll have a pretty good idea by early June where we stand in terms of our projected storage. We'll also know whether or not the state has taken any actions that could further limit our water supply, such as curtailments. In 2014 and 2015, the state did implement water rights curtailments that reduced our ability to divert water and resulted in the loss of an additional, in 2015, resulted in the loss of an additional 25,000 acre feet. Now, it's unlikely that we would see that kind of impact this year, but we won't know exactly where we stand until probably the early part of June. So our recommendation is to schedule Freeport operation for late summer, then evaluate conditions in June and reduce or eliminate CVP deliveries if our storage projections improve. If it looks like we're going to be above 475, we may not need to operate Freeport under those projections. But if we continue dry, as we're expecting that we may, we would still be in a position to start operating Freeport as soon as August. Next slide. The other important piece of a drought stage 1 response would be to consider voluntary customer use reductions. We're considering ways that we can make a mild ask of our customers, implement voluntary reductions of up to 10%, which during the first year of implementation, we would anticipate would result in about a 5-year total demand reduction achieved in the first year. Again, this is a voluntary reduction in demand. 5%. Did I say something? I'm sorry. It would result in a 5% total demand reduction in the first year. That would result in about a 7,000 acre-foot reduction in water use, a revenue loss of about $20 million. And we'd be focusing our messaging on actions that our customers could take, less on the percentage reduction overall, but rather, what customers can do, simple actions now to save water, just in case next year is also dry. Next slide. All right, our drought messaging actions would start in May to achieve this water use reduction. We would inform customers by using our available platforms, publications, newsletters, social media, etc. Educate our customers, raise awareness about the drought, amplifying the states of California's messaging as well as Bay Area regional messaging. And we would implement conservation measures for efficient use of water supplies indoors and outdoors, focusing again on targeted actions, awareness for our customers, and simple things that people can do to reduce their overall supplies without a major impact on their lives. Certainly also considering that as we've gone through a pandemic here, the continued importance of hand washing and other public health uses of water supply, that those should not be considered for any kind of a reduction.
Mike, I have a question. I assume this is stepping up our education, or not just diverting our education from one part of our messaging to another part, but actually increase. Does that mean an increased budget or increased costs for doing this education to encourage people to reduce their water use?
It's really kind of a refocus, and I don't believe there will be a need for an increased expenditure, a significant increased expenditure on the conservation measures. We're going to be able to take advantage of a lot more attention on the drought conditions, and that's going to allow us to more broadly implement our conservation program, just because there's a greater awareness in the community and among our customers.
So local news shows and stuff like that are covering the drought, we make sure our messaging is included in their discussions of the drought.
And collaborating with all of the other water agencies in the Bay Area that are in different stages of drought themselves.
Director Coleman, you have a question?
Doug, I have a quick question of Mike. Even though this may not have an increased cost, which is good, I think the media message is going to be extremely strong. Our bill inserts, are we geared now? I know that we have to do a planning process for what's in the bill inserts, but between now and for a period of time after the drought, we need to make sure that we're talking about having the message loud and clear for those who get it. My concern is those who get it electronically, the bill may not. Do they get the bill insert?
Yes.
Now.
So. Well, Kelly could probably get into the details, but we will be putting information in our bill inserts. We're going to be leveraging social media. There will be information on our website. We do have about 200,000 residential customers currently receiving the water report, and they'll be getting the messages as well.
Okay.
So there's going to be a lot of targeted advertising to get that information out. And certainly Kelly is available to provide even more details if you have more questions.
But this is Director Young, but it is true that for those who are on electronic billing and aren't signed up for the water report comes by email. They might or not look at it. There's nothing that's going to come in the mail for people that are on electronic billing, correct?
I'll let Kelly answer more of that question.
Hi, this is Kelly, Public Affairs Director for EBMUD, and Andrew also probably has a little bit of insight into this, but we are looking at ways to better utilize the emails that people get around paying their bills. So the KUBRA system and others, there are ways that we can program more messaging into that so that you might not get the paper bill, so you might not see customer pipeline, but there's ways to increase that messaging in those emails or those electronic notifications that you get for your bill. And so we're looking, we're already doing some messaging around that, but we'll also look at emphasizing, drought and conservation in those as well.
Kelly, this is John. When somebody pays electronically, do they get a receipt back saying that their payment has been received?
No.
Okay.
Maybe I'll let Andrew.
I don't know if that can be done, and at the same time saying we're in a drought, you need to save water. Here's a link to see how you can save water. It should be an inexpensive way to get the message out to those who pay electronically.
Yeah, I mean, getting back to the point of how we reach customers, we do have multiple ways reaching customers, and particular, everything that you see on the paper bill, we can mirror that message in KUBRA in the electronic bill pay, so they would see the same messages where we have the targeted message on conservation. And then in terms of, I do believe that you get a confirmation when you receive, when you pay your bill electronically, but I do have to, just to be safe, I will confirm that.
Yeah, I can say, because I pay electronically, I do get an email saying that they took the money out of my account, so I do receive that.
Yeah, no, you do. It's true, but it's generic.
Director McIntosh, you have a question?
Sure. I guess to sum it up, this is one of those rare moments in time where we do not have a choice between options. And I'm happy to see us getting an early start from the lessons learned during the 2014-2015 drought. But just as to the money, I want to just be clear. You said that with the use of CDP water, there's going to be an additional cost of approximately 25 to 30 million. And as well, a revenue loss of approximately 20 million, given the voluntary customer use reduction. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And we're making provisions for that, obviously. That's a question.
Yes, so our plan has been, when declaring a stage 1 drought, to rely on our rate stabilization fund, our reserves for that initial year of drought. And
there are sufficient funds to cover that and some.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so at 92, 94 million?
95 million.
95, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, did you have anything further on your report?
I do not.
Any other questions from board members? If not, I'll go to public comment on this. Maybe we should do that anyway.
Okay. Mr. Albert, you should be able, all right. And your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you. Heinrich Albert, speaking for Sierra Club. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. Thanks to the staff for all the good work that you folks have been done to assess the water situation. For me, as a customer of EBMUD, The drought we're looking at means that maybe my yard is going to be more brown and that I'm going to have to cut my showers a little bit more. Inconvenient, but I will survive. Wildlife, on the other hand, that's dependent on our rivers, very well may not survive. I want to remind you about the last drought. In 2014, the Bureau of Reclamation released so much water from the Shasta Reservoir, they lost cold water storage in the reservoir. This was supposed to make up for access to the headwaters of the streams where there would be cold water that salmon could successfully spawn in. So we blocked that off with the dams. We have the cold water storage to make up for it, but we didn't actually use it, or that is, we gave it away. So the result was, in 2014, we estimated temperature-dependent mortality of endangered winter-run Chinook salmon was 77%. In 2015, it was 85% mortality. And this year, if releases continue at the way they look that they're going to go, it's going to be even higher. Maybe 89% is a current estimate. The more demand we put on that cold water that's stored in Shasta, which is the water that we would get through the Freeport facility, the more likely it is that we're going to have a repeat. We are going to once again decimate our salmon populations. I want to ask you to consider not asking for this water. Let us, humans that can make adjustments, do so a little bit more and try to reduce the impact on the fish and the other wildlife that depends on having water in the rivers. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your comments. Let me build on that and just ask the staff, do we know, I mean, these are interesting numbers that Mr. Albert just presented to us. I wasn't fully aware of that. I'm curious whether the Bureau, having observed this predicament, has factored this into their estimates of available water supplies.
So a couple things to make clear. First of all, Mr. Albert is speaking of winter-run Chinook salmon, which are in the Sacramento River, not in the McKelvey River. The source of CVP supply for East Bay MUD's contract is Folsom Reservoir, not Shasta Reservoir. However, it's an integrated system. So it's kind of taking from one or the other in an integrated way. Absolutely, there were significant winter run losses in 2014 and 2015, and the Bureau of Reclamation has come up with its own operational scheme this year that may or may not result in similar concerns. Certainly concerns have been raised by conservation groups and others that the way the Bureau is planning to operate this year could further damage the winter run fishery. The question of if East Bay MUD were to not take its water supply does not necessarily mean that that water is going to go to fish. More likely is if the Bureau does not change its operational scheme, any water that East Bay MUD does not take would go to other CVP contractors potentially, which would include south of Delta exporters or other municipal CVP contractors as well.
Marguerite?
Yeah, my question is along a similar vein here, is that is whether by taking water from Freeport this time, that now versus waiting, how does that impact the availability of the cold water pool that we need in Comanche to keep our fishery management working? Or like, what's that interplay? So it's like, it, you know, there may be a trade-off in terms of, I mean, it sounds like from what you're saying that our you know, it's not assured that our CVP allocation, absent us deciding to take it and then leave it in the river instead of putting it through the conveyance, isn't assured. And that taking it from Freeport might mean that we don't have to that we leave it in our, you know, basically leave it in our system. Is that the right way to think about it? Or how does that part of it work in terms of, you know, Freeport operations and McCollum fishery management?
So a couple of things. Yes, when we operate Freeport, we divert that water to the East Bay and deliver it to our customers. It does mean that we take less water potentially out of Pardee than we would have otherwise. Certainly, from that perspective, helps to some degree with cold water pool issues on the McCallum. The other factor that's quite significant is that the district is committed to its gain share provision, which provides that 20% of whatever it diverts at Freeport, it will allocate to storage in Pardee and Comanche. In Comanche, actually, that would be released for fish down the river. So 20% of everything we divert is dedicated to fish on the McCallum, and therefore we're creating kind of an additional storage pool in Comanche that allows for more cold water to benefit the lower McCallum. And the results were from the last drought, when we first implemented this with gain share provisions and operating Freeport, that our fish, our record salmon returns were 3 years later, you know, 3-year salmon life cycle. So if you look at 2014 and 2015, then you jump 3 years out to 2017 and 2018, those were our record salmon returns on the McCallum. And part of that is because of the benefits that they receive because of gain share and the other storage provisions that we have.
Yes.
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mike, for explaining that. Yeah, I just, too bad, I mean, wanted Henrik, and I'm sure Henrik is still listening, and others. And as you mentioned, Mike, we were the only river system in the state of California that had an increase in salmon returns during and post drought because how we managed in the gain sharing with water. And quite frankly, if we ended up purchasing the water, which I hope we do from the CVP, and our water is able to stay more in Pardee and Comanche, and we end up with a wet year, that means that more water is going to be released downriver for the fisheries than it would have been otherwise, because the CVP water will be coming into local storage reservoirs. So from a standpoint, the cost is minimal compared to the water market transfer market. You know, $700 an acre foot versus less than $100 an acre foot, at least 2014, 2015. Our customers have done a phenomenal job on saving water and continue to save water. We have a commitment to the environment and to the fisheries, and we are holding to that. And we've been chastised by some for doing just that, but it's the right thing to do. I think when we use our water in our system, we're very conservative in the terms of how we use it. And there's very strong environmental benefits. And there's also strong economic benefits for our customers as well. And the other thing to keep in mind, I mean, my gosh, how many people are going to continue to work from home as we go into with the pandemic? We don't know how long and how many people continue to stay there. We've seen the usage of water for single family homes has gone up prior to the pandemic. So a lot of people are going to still do that. And I don't know. I think I am very comfortable with how we've dealt with our water supply in terms of resource management. I think staff has done a phenomenal job over the years. And quite frankly, I think this is a minor investment. And maybe it ends up that we don't need it, or it gets to be very wet in fall of 2021, winter of 2022. That means there's going to be more water in the river for the fisheries, and our reservoirs locally will be refilled as well as upcountry.
President Lenny, we
So-
have one other
I wanted
person for
to-
public comment.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead with that before taking any further questions from board members?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Peter Rosen, you should be able to unmute your mic.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Peter.
Great. Thank you. This was very informative. I really appreciate informing the public. It's clear and understandable. I think we all grasp it. I have a couple questions specifically about maybe its implementation. This may happen in a later presentation or one of the other staff members' reports. But particularly, I wanted to know how aggressively water conservation members or efforts will be moving forward towards the residential customers. I'm a landscape contractor, and I have encouraged people to do lawn diets, and we've done water efficient irrigation systems and sprinkler timers and controllers that are weather sensing and smart controllers. But if, quite honestly, the monetary, the numbers that people would invest on that and the resources towards it aren't usually the deciding factor on it. And so I didn't know if there's going to be an aggressive push for some of those to be increased in the future. And then the second question I had, just it's great to hear about storage for the future, but I wanted to know if EBMUD is going to revisit basically toilet to tap. Is there any recycling program efficiencies coming down the stretch, and have you looked at some ways of possibly supplementing some of these local storage with recycled water, not just for the landscape, because that would require repiping in established development. So, thank you.
Why don't we, Mike, if you want to take the second one first, and Andrew can answer the question about the conservation outreach.
Sure. EBMUD has been a leader in recycled water for decades, and we've had an active recycled water program that offsets potable water use and water imports by recycling water and using it for industrial use and irrigation. The board in 2 years ago, in 2019, approved a new recycled water master plan that essentially doubles the recycled water capacity commitment for the district by the year 2040 to 20 million gallons per day. That will include additional industrial reuse and irrigation, and within that 20-year time frame, also evaluate other recycled water options, such as reuse for potable systems through groundwater recharge or other programs. But those are on the side right now. Our focus is industrial reuse and irrigation.
Mike, if I might, didn't we realize last drought the amount of savings of water for the residential, because we were able to divert so much water to the recycled water to the industrial side?
Yeah, so that's right. During the last drought, we produced, 7 to 10,000 acre feet of additional water supply as a result of our recycled water program, which reduced the need for customers to do even more drastic conservation, or for us to bring in additional supplemental supply at high cost. So the recycled water is an important element. We look at both the demand reduction side with recycled water and conservation, as well as the supplemental supply side, when we're trying to solve the equation and determine what makes up the best answer in terms of water supply reliability.
And I would point out to everybody that Peter Rosen is also a member of the Hayward Area Recreation District Board of Directors.
And if I can chime in here real quick, so Peter's aware, and Frank is certainly aware of this because of our activities on DURWA, our Joint Powers Authority with DSRSD. We don't have an adequate supply of wastewater to treat for recycled water. That's, I mean, we're now in an agreement with Contra Costa Sanitary District. While for the water they can't reuse, we're able to purchase and reuse it in the DOA system. So there's actually a lack of supply in part of our service area where recycled water is provided.
So, this is Andrew Lee. In response to Mr. Rosen's first question related to conservation measures for residential customers, we're taking a number of measures to help residential customers to achieve further savings. I know they've been doing quite a bit since the last drought and really maintain a level of water savings that we're very proud of. And the things that we are doing inside the house is that we are definitely going to intensify our outreach effort to remind customers if they have high bills on looking for leaks, the way to look for ways to save inside a home by looking at rebate program to replace fixtures. And on the outside, we are going to intensify our effort to really market the rebate program on lawn replacement. Obviously, some of the biggest savings we're going to be able to achieve is the outdoor use. And part of it is, if customers are looking at replacing a lawn, that is a huge saving from a water conservation side. And just in the last 6 months, I think between July and December last year, customers have replaced over 60,000 square feet of lawn. And so that, will deliver real results. And we're hoping that in the next few months, the customers will continue to look for opportunity to replace lawns with more native plants and look for additional way to save water. And and also one last thing that I do want to mention, that we do have another rebate program that we just launched about a year and a half ago on the flow meter device, where customers are using that to, as a strap-on device they put on the meter, so they can monitor their own water use inside their home. And that rebate program has been taken off really well, very popular. We're seeing it in the increased number of people looking at applying for the rebate. And what that does is that it helps them monitor their use inside a home and giving them alert when they have really high usage and irregular usage. So those are a lot of things we're doing, just a few examples. Of course, a whole lot more.
I guess my concern was how, if you were going to aggressively push for additional efforts beyond what had happened previously, whether it's beyond the 50 cents a square foot lawn reduction, or so much per valve, or $75 for a smart controller. I mean, all those things help, but I think that if you strike while the iron's hot and encourage people with additional monetary incentives, you might get more efforts. I'm just trying to encourage, because you got the low-hanging fruit last time, or we got the low-hanging fruit over the last several years. I mean, I've done enough of that, but I think getting the next stage, I think it's going to take a monetary push. So that was what I was thinking. Is there additional effort?
So, President Linney, should we pull up the 4 recommended actions again, just for the board to see?
Yes.
No, they're being pulled up. I'll move the item.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Director Coleman, seconded by Director Patterson. The recommended action is a resolution with these 4 items included in it. Any further questions?
Yeah, I would like to confirm, just to clarify, do we have a species take impact when we turn Freeport on? My understanding is that our use of screenings at the gates prevents impacts, but I just wanted to clarify.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that question, Director Cass. Can you repeat it?
I was asking about potential species impacts at Freeport. I thought that we have screening that prevents that type of impact, but I wanted to double check.
Yes, we do have state-of-the-art screens at the Freeport facility and are permitted to divert water with those screens not impact species.
And actually, what we heard at the Freeport meeting last week, Andy, was that there are other water entities that are coming to look at how successful our screening is at Freeport for them to emulate.
I
Director
remember
Katz.
when the facility was dedicated, that was the highlight of the show, if you will, to all the folks that were in attendance. And I was in attendance at that, and it was very, very well received.
And this is Dave Briggs. Just to answer your question more fully, Director Katz, we've been monitoring, by biological opinion and by requirement, we've been monitoring the fish screens for over 10 years. The performance is excellent. The approach velocities on the screen are very low. As you know, the architecture is such that there's a sweeping velocity of higher velocities going up downstream and a relatively small velocity diverting fish or diverting water into the intake. But both for salmon and smelt, the results have been very, very good, so much so that the fishery agencies have relaxed our monitoring requirements.
All right, any other comments, questions before we go to a roll call vote here?
Yeah, I'd like to make some comments.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I do have questions in general about the rationale for how we would modify our thresholds to when stage 1 begins in terms of our guidelines. We're not making that decision today in terms of our standing program for guidelines. It does feel a little bit fish out of water, if you'll pardon the pun, in terms of adopting a drought declaration in between a potential change in guidelines. But this does seem to be a cusp year in a number of ways, and so I can think a bit out of water in that sense. When we considered the guidelines, particularly the impact of weather and when we turn on Freeport, we received a lot of information about when that trigger would occur, a histograph of how often it would occur based on previous rainfall patterns, taking into account our normal consumption patterns. And I don't feel like we've received that information today, but my understanding is that we are not making the decision on the new guidelines today. We can consider that at a later point. And I would want more of that quantitative information before we make that kind of change to our standing guidelines. So I'm really thinking about the proposal in terms of what we're doing today for this particular year and this particular drought response. I agree that it's reasonable to extrapolate the 90% exceedance level to project total system storage by the end of the water year. I wouldn't normally do that, but given the extreme dry season that we've had this year, and that most of the remaining water year seems to be groundwater, that is a function of that pattern that we've already received this year. That approach that staff recommends does seem to make sense to me. I think it's a very interesting consideration to take into account what is taking Freeport water mean for the cold water pool. I would much appreciate more information about that as in the coming weeks as we're confirming any decision about Freeport, because those benefits would make a difference to me, and I think benefit the board. I think it's also interesting to consider ways that it might be beneficial to take Freeport this year compared to next year, given that there's more water flowing through the Sacramento River into the Delta this year. We might be having a slightly lower impact on water deliveries this year. So spreading it out might make more sense. But that's a very small effect and doesn't carry a lot of weight in the decision. So taking water out of Freeport is a decision I take very seriously, because even if we do switch to a renewable energy tariff, it has an energy impact and it has a water impact. on the overall health of the Delta, and those are things to take very seriously. But we also have a water management plan that is designed to balance all of our interests and customer needs. And so I'm prepared to support making the declaration today, but still considering the decision very carefully before we actually need to make the delivery decision. My last comment is specific to the renewable tariff. So I appreciate staff looking into the availability of renewable tariffs that SMUD offers. I looked at the power content label for the 2 leading commercial tariffs that SMUD offers, and I want to just double check that we're getting the right one, because there's 2 tariffs. One of them is Utah delivered tradable, so-called tradable credits that are out of state, don't necessarily relate to the energy that's being delivered into the state or emissions generated in the state at once. That's just the green energy partner tariff. And I would want to make sure that we're not subscribing to that we would be subscribing to the green energy partner plus product, which is the product that's actually generated in California and has a more balanced portfolio. So if there's any divergence from that, I would want to make sure that we review that at the Sustainability and Energy Committee before we confirm all of this. So those are my views on the drought declaration. I want to thank staff for getting us prepared because it does help our customers and board deliberations the best when we are prepared. And I'm glad that we've had a few meetings to be able to consider this going forward.
All right, Lisa, I think you had your hand up next.
Sure. This is in reference to item 4 of the resolution before us, to authorize additional measures to support water conservation efforts is necessary. And that's very general. So I'm looking forward to our ability to chime in and make further recommendations with regards to those further conservation efforts. And I'm particularly concerned about outdoor use, because that's where we could get the most bang for our buck with curtailment. And municipalities, our messaging has to be very strong with regards to municipalities, because we see the watering of parks and medians, and it's really overwatering and inappropriate, quite frankly. And also HOAs and multi-unit dwellings, we have to get the message out to those folks who don't necessarily receive a water bill. So I look forward to chiming in further on those recommendations. And I am all supportive. I agree, staff has done a great job in preparing us for this day. And I look forward to moving forward.
Great, thank you. Marguerite, I think you're next. And then Frank.
Yeah, thank you. I want to extend my kudos to the staff as well for, I think we all know we've been getting ready for this for months now. And the prospect of matching or coming close to matching the year that awakened my water conservation awareness. I mean, if we're close to 77, I really hope we're not close to 76 next year in reverse. And so I think anything that we can do this year to better prepare us for that prospect is you know, well taken. And I think recognizing that our watershed is not connected for the most part to the CVP or the State Water Project. And we've got a whole watershed to look after, including the fish, and balancing that with the impact that, you know, we've got the facility at Freeport, which means we use it. I wasn't necessarily for it when it was getting built, but now that it's there, I think optimizing and balancing the, you know, the impact of of using our American River water rights via Freeport, along with our what's incumbent upon us for managing the health of the fishery on the McCullamy is a real important consideration. And I hope that, along with Lisa's number 4, that we are really looking at how are we, what is that next level of conservation measure that we can endorse to clamp down on water use. I think we're close to having it right in terms of when we get to if we get to a stage 2 or 3 in terms of what to do. I would like to put out there the idea that we bring the excessive use fee in possibly sooner. I know those considerations are down the road, but that's something that I think we may want to bring that hammer down sooner rather than later, as we get into the hopefully don't get into the later stages of this. But if we are looking at moving into stage 2, I hope we're trying to preclude it. But with that, I'm definitely going to support the motion.
Frank.
Now, there's the old saying, those that
Bill.
don't learn from history are doomed to relive history. And I think we learned a very valuable lesson the last time around when what was promised to us was taken away from us. And so this action now is most timely and needs to go forward. Yes, I agree, Lisa. We want to see how we get into those processes, but we got to take this step now so that the rest of that does not become a knee-jerk reaction, but a more thoughtful approach. So yes, I'll be supporting this as well, but to my way of thinking, we've got to stay a step ahead because, Mr. Newsom kind of got his tutelage from a guy by the name of Jerry Brown. I'll leave it with that.
All right, Bill, you want to go next?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we have a very sensitive board. And in all cases over the years, we have been on target. We have one of the most creative teams in management of this water supply that ever existed on the planet. And we have given them the tools to work with. And in my venturing both at Freeport in getting that facility in the first place, and secondly, upcountry, where we have a lot of input in words, even from the state, but it's our management of the McCullamy that always sticks out front. Because if we weren't there doing that, many, many other downstream interests would be affected. So I want to congratulate the staff, and I want to thank my fellow board members for keeping them equipped with what they need to bring us this information. Sometimes you have to bring information that isn't good because they don't have everything to work with. So let's continue that creativity. Let's support it in the interest of my constituents, the people who I'm concerned about down here and what they do. The education process that goes on in East Bay MUD and the effects of that, I see reflected all over the place as I talk to people in many settings. And so I think we're where we ought to be this year. In the coming years, the staff is there to help us get ready and to give the warnings. And anything that comes out of this year that's not right, they're going to reflect back to us. So I wanted to put that on the record. And that's why I'm supporting the resolution and where we are today.
Thanks, Bill. So I'll just add my voice of support as well. I do think that this is very prudent as a first step in getting us on drought defense footing, if you will, and still keeps many other options open as we go down the road and hope for rain, but plan for the worst here. I think that given the fact that this is a particularly dry year, the second driest year in our history, that bending rules perhaps that we had set up before for how exactly we proceed is actually makes sense and is very prudent in dealing with this. And so I totally support this. I hope our customers will react in the way they have in the past and support, find ways to trim their water budgets, as much as they can, tighten their water belts, and we can get through this with hopefully a minimum amount of pain and cost, and hope again for a wet year next year to save us from the worst consequences of a 2-year drought or 2 or 3 year drought. So unless there's other comments or questions, I believe we have a motion and a second already. Earlier, that's right?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Then let's have a roll call vote.
Okay. Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes,
Director Young,
Yep.
President Lenny.
Yes.
Thank you. We knew this would be a very difficult decision. We appreciate your understanding and support. And we will bring back to a future board meeting all the questions that you had asked with additional information. I do want to add that we are doing a lot of work internally as well. You know that we're increasing our pipeline replacement next year, adding an additional 2.5 miles. We have 2,000 leak detection loggers out in the system, and in the next few months, we're going to be installing 700 more. And I'll also add that we still need to flush water out when we do install pipes and do work. We're going to have signage out there so the public is aware why we're doing the flushing. So you may hear from your constituents, but all of that flushing is for water quality. And we want you to understand that that activity will still be going on as we do our work. But we're going to be very cognizant of not wasting water, but making sure that we do protect water quality.
Clifford, this is an odd question. When we have to do the water flushing, I know we have to do it for health and safety issues, and it can be a lot of water that we flush out of a pipe. Are we able to inform the people in that area, which you're talking about doing, for a way for them to collect the water that we're flushing out?
We did look at that during the last drought of collecting some of the water and offering it to the cities to use, and we can do the same this time around as well.
I think that would be good PR on our part to do that, so it's not going down the drain, so to speak, and somebody can use it for a beneficial purpose.
Yeah, so it'll be out there. I don't think we had a lot of takers last time, but we'll revisit that again.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up, this item is on the short-term indebtedness, and it was presented to the Finance Administration Committee meeting this morning. And the item is to extend authorization of the short-term indebtedness, and the committee did unanimously accept the report, and Robbie Haney, our Treasury Manager, will make the presentation.
Okay, good afternoon, President Lenny and members of the board. I am Robbie Haney, the Treasury Manager of the district, and like the General Manager said, I'll be briefly discussing extending the authorization of short-term indebtedness. And we can go through this pretty quickly. Yeah, next slide. Thank you. I'm on slide 1. Our short-term indebtedness is basically our 2 commercial paper programs, and those programs total about $346 million. The interest rate on commercial paper is pretty low right now. It was about 1% last fiscal year, and today it's even lower at about 15 basis points. It of course can go up and down over time. It's variable rate, but right now it's pretty low. And commercial paper is our primary variable rate exposure in our debt portfolio. Next slide, please. So in order for us to have short-term indebtedness here, the MUD Act requires the board to authorize a program every 7 years. And the board has done that regularly since 1987, with the most recent authorization occurring in 2015. So we're asking for a new authorization now about 1 year early in order to accommodate the right to referendum under the MUD Act and to provide for ongoing commercial paper rolls past the current authorization. The maximum authorization allowed under the MUD Act is the lesser of two things. One is the average annual revenue over the last 3 years, or 25% of total debt outstanding. And right now, that maximum would limit us to 688 million of commercial paper, but we're well below that, and we have no plans to increase it. Next slide, please. Since we're on the topic of commercial paper, we wanted to remind the board that we plan to actually pay down a portion of our commercial paper this year. And the source of that pay down is savings within our debt budget from interest costs that have been less than budgeted and the delay of a new bond issue. So due to those two things, we had savings within the budget, and we're targeting to pay down about 23 million in water commercial paper and 700,000 in wastewater commercial paper. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for the next step, we're asking the board today to adopt the included resolution, which authorizes the short-term indebtedness program. And then in addition, as always, we'll continue to bring items to the Finance and Administration Committee and the board when there's opportunities to improve or optimize the use of our commercial paper in the future. But the main item here, thank you. The main item here is the adoption of the resolution, and I am happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Frank.
Robbie, what is that interest rate that we would be moving to?
The commercial paper changes all the time. It's a variable rate, and this doesn't change the rate. So we have an ongoing program going, and right now we're getting 10 to 15 basis points. So 0.1 to 0.15%. So it's extremely low. We put in there last fiscal year, it was about 1% on average. So it's down even lower. So this has been a very low cost of debt, lower than our fixed rate debt. Again, it's variable rate. It has some risk to it. We want to limit the amount we have, but anyway, by authorizing this program, you're basically extending it another 7 years, but it doesn't really change the rates we're getting.
Robbie, people are buying these bonds at that?
Yeah, yeah, they are. You buy them, they typically go between 30 and 90 days. So you're locking your money up between 30 and 90 days when you buy one of these, and you're accepting really low rates. Now, I wish on the flip side, I wish I could say it's good for us. But we also buy bonds. We have about 800 million that we invest in various products, including bonds, and we get about the same rates. So when rates go high on the commercial paper, we say, well, we're hedged because we're getting more on our own investments. So I have to say here that though it's great when these go that low, we also have offsetting there. But it has been nice. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. We've been happy with it. It's out of our control. I mean, it's just kind of the market. The short-term rates are very low right now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Do I have a motion to?
I'll
move.
All right.
Let me just say the Finance Committee heard and is recommending this, and that's why I was making the motion. But I'll be happy to second yours.
I'll second the chair's motion of that committee. So
I will accept the motion from Bill Patterson and a second from Director Mellon. And let's have a roll call vote.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
for sure, yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yep.
President Liddy.
Yes. All right, we're on
Good
to
job.
our next item then. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So next, we have the Oakland Chinatown Community Benefits District. At the last board meeting, the board adopted a resolution condemning and combating racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against the AAPI community. The Oakland Chinatown community organizations and leaders are working together to form an Oakland Chinatown Community Benefits District, and this is a special assessments district that will provide supplemental benefits to property owners, businesses, organizations, and employees in the area. This includes beautification of the area, special ambassadors to provide bilingual assistance and additional security, pedestrian safety, and promoting Oakland Chinatown. We can participate in the first step in this process of creating the proposed assessment district by signing the petition for the formation. Now, this motion will only authorize me to sign the petition. If the petition is successful, I'll bring another item to the board to consider authorizing the district to cast a ballot for the assessment district. They estimate that the annual assessment for East Bay MUD would be about $10,000. Can answer any questions you may have.
I would move the item happily.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Director McIntosh, seconded by Director Patterson. Any further discussion?
Seems like
all right.
being a good neighbor to me.
Yeah.
Let me just say, quickie, I was able to contact Carl Chan, who is president of the Chinatown, and he informed me, we're old friends, we go way back, that there's an activity coming up on the 15th as well. And I wanted to make sure to get that into the record. I'm going to be standing with him and marching in the Chinatown May 15th event. And that's to stand up with my fellow Asian Americans in this time of strife and moving ahead for progress for all humanity. I just wanted to get that on the record.
Great, thank you, Bill. I had just one question. So there's a Oakland benefits district, right?
Sorry.
Yeah, benefit district for downtown Oakland, I believe. And is this on top of that, or does it cover that? Are we part of that also? Do you know?
I'm not aware of the Oakland Benefits District. This is about the Oakland Chinatown Community Benefits District, but it looks like Craig might have something to add.
From what I read on the petition and in the papers that they would be presenting to the Oakland City Council, is that this would be an enhancement over and above the Oakland City assessment.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I assumed. I just wanted to check on that. All right, let's go ahead and have a roll call vote on this.
Okay. Director Coleman?
Yes.
Director Katz?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Mellon?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
Yes.
Director Young?
Yes.
President Lenny?
Yes.
Thank you. And
Carries unanimously.
thank you.
Doug, if I may, my computer is telling me it's going to restart in 12 minutes and 19 seconds. So if you lose me,
Yeah, mine already did, at least.
it looks like I don't have an option here.
You try right clicking, but
Right click,
hopefully we'll be done by then.
yeah. 12 minutes and 1 second now.
Yeah. Countdown clock.
Okay.
All right.
So I just have two more items. The first one is our coronavirus update, and Dave Briggs, Director of Operations Maintenance, will provide the update.
Members of the board, and Janetta, I'm going to use the arrow keys here at the podium when you're ready. So we're happy to give you the latest update here, and as usual, we benefit from having the state of California produce an update midday on Tuesday, so we can get you the latest information. And along those lines, Alameda County, Contra Costa County, Calaveras County, and now joined by Amador County are now in the orange tier, while San Joaquin and actually Sacramento remain in the red tier. And that being said, The data for Alameda County in the past week has looked really good, and I'm referring to the infection rates. They've been very, very low. Very happy to see that. And California as well is trending downwards at a faster pace as well. But all that enthusiasm and optimism, of course, is tempered by knowing that it's very difficult to predict where things are going to go in the future, and also certainly acknowledge that things are not going well everywhere outside of California, both nationally and internationally. But we'll take what we can, and things in Alameda County and Contra Costa County and the state of California are going pretty well right now. I guess it was earlier in April, the governor announced that there would be a conclusion or an end to the tier system in the middle of June, when he would, quote unquote, reopen the state, essentially ending statewide restrictions on businesses. But that does not mean the pandemic is over, and it does depend on not only vaccine supplies continuing, but also an equitable distribution of those vaccine supplies within the state. And also acknowledging that the state of California has done very well with vaccinations. Remember, a couple months ago or 3 months ago, we were really at a low rate. I think we were the worst state in the nation, and now we're the best. So we're really making some good progress with vaccinations. I'll keep going unless there's a question. Also, adequacy of supply, equitable distribution of vaccine, and also making sure that the hospitals are not overburdened by the infection rates that we see at that time. But various social distancing measures. Is there a question, Director?
Director Young, do you have a question?
You just want to mute.
Okay, I'll keep going. After June 15th, social distancing measures will certainly be in place. Most of them, in fact, I think they'll continue for the foreseeable future. In March, the governor signed SB 95 into law, which grants essentially an additional 80 hours of leave for a broad range of COVID-related reasons. And our HR staff, Laura Acosta, Lisa Serrani, Winnie Anderson, have done a great job in explaining to our staff what types of activities or COVID-related activities are eligible for this new leave, how to code your timesheet, and how it relates to other leave that the district has available to employees. It is not simple, and they've done a great job helping employees navigate that. The district, we're still doing well. 14 months or so into this pandemic, operationally, we're doing well. But as we turn to slide 3, we certainly want to distinguish that operationally we're well, but certainly the pandemic still has a personal impact on our employees. At this point, we have 84 positives at the district, 14 contractors, and 1 or 2 have not returned to work, who are still isolating, who are COVID positive. The employees who are off work for COVID-related reasons is about 23, the last time I checked, which was a few hours ago. And we have and do continue to see many employees calling our hotline. I think a majority of the calls we're getting on the hotline right now are due to the after effects of getting the vaccine. So we have quite a few, probably between 6 and 10 people at home right now, just simply recovering from their second dose. And you can see the chart below. Hard to say where things are going to go next, but we're certainly pleased that even though April, I think that number in April is now a 5 and not a 4, we're hoping that we're finally turning the corner on this. In terms of vaccinations, employees have been really, just based anecdotally, stories I've heard and people I've spoken to, many employees are obviously getting vaccinated and taking advantage. Last week, we had 33% of our employees that had filled out the form indicating that they had received their second dose or their first dose of the Johnson & Johnson, if they did receive that one. So this is on par with Alameda County numbers, with statewide numbers. And the latest statewide numbers, I believe, are about 37% have been totally vaccinated in the state of California over the age of 16, and another 20% above that, so a total of 57%, have at least received 1 dosage in the state of California. So we're really doing well statewide, and the 27 million doses administered in the state, I think that's closer to 29 million now. So things are progressing. And we are seeing a good percentage of employees getting vaccinated. And even this number is somewhat the number of employees that we have the number we're showing here is somewhat of a lagging metric. Many people are getting in the process of getting vaccinated right now. Many more just haven't gotten around to filling out the form yet. So I think it's safe to say that we've got a pretty progressive group here of employees who are getting vaccinated at a pretty good clip here. So this number will continue to climb. So that being said, just as everywhere, there is vaccine hesitancy, and we have done outreach to employees and sponsored various forums to get good information on all sides of the issue in front of employees to try to make people more comfortable with getting vaccinated. We will plan more. This and the Safe Return to Workplace plan are really where the EOT is going to be focused in the next few months, is trying to get as many people vaccinated as possible. So along the lines of the Safe Return to Workplace plan, right now, all the safety protocols remain in place, but we know based on the governor's announcement a couple of hours ago and what the CDC is doing, we know that rules will change, the framework will change with more individual freedoms will be granted for those who have been vaccinated, both at an individual level and as the population gets vaccinated. Various other restrictions will be lifted, but we don't have anything to operate off of yet. And when we do, we will adjust our plan, which includes the board of directors plan. We will have the most current information in there once we receive it. So these plans they're framework plans, and it will be relatively easy to adjust various parameters within these plans as we get more direction from the CDC or local county health orders. Again, just other parts of the plan that are relevant. They will guide the occupancy levels in our buildings and in our conference rooms, and how the public can access our buildings and interact with our employees. And it will include telecommuting as well. And we're looking at the middle of June, or I guess more specifically, June 18th is a Friday, so June 21st as a Monday would be the beginning of getting people back into the office, assuming that all of our metrics continue to go well, assuming we have the safety protocols in place, assuming we have parking figured out. We will be getting some people back in the building as we start to transition away from full-time telecommuting. And that's all I have for you today.
Any questions?
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
So with the talk of the drought and the talk of the pandemic, I thought it'd be nice to bring something that would make you feel a little better. So last July, while responding to a boat grounding incident at Comanche Reservoir, Greg Franchik, our ranger naturalist, noticed some very unique geologic formations in the area. He returned to the site and discovered many fossilized trees. So we did seek the expertise of paleontologists to assess the site. And since then, we found many fossils dating back to the Miocene period, about 5 to 10 million years ago. So Greg is going to share with you some of the really fascinating discoveries in the past year.
Hello, this is Greg. Can you hear me? Is my microphone on?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Great. Thank you very much. I'll turn my timer on here. Hello, directors. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be sharing this presentation with you today. I am Greg Franchik, Ranger Naturalist 2 in the McCullough Resource Patrol Unit. Hopefully, you'll find this briefing interesting and a little more relaxed than the serious drought business that came before it. I must begin by stating that, as is standard practice with sensitive scientific sites, the protection and security of this location is high importance, which requires me to leave out certain information related to its location. Next slide, please.
Oh, well, this is obvious from this picture where the location is. You gave it all away.
It's a giveaway, isn't it? So this fantastic, this fantastic artwork is by paleo artist Mauricio Anton. And it's a depiction of a North American landscape during the Miocene epoch. The title of the slide is Prehistoric Wildlife of the Miocene Era, but actually, to be accurate, the Miocene was an epoch, not an era. This is the time range in which my update will discuss. The scene, in fact, may resemble what the site actually looked like where our fossil study is occurring. We have located and recovered no less than half of the 6 animal genus that's shown in this image. The deciduous trees and grasses are probably also consistent. Next slide, please. So I'm here to talk about the paleontology project that's occurring. I am the coordinator of the project. Paleontology is a branch of science concerned with the study of fossil life. And I'm going to try and squeeze in a story that's been millions of years in the making down to less than 20 minutes. So here we go. As project coordinator, I'm the hub of all activities related to the survey, excavation, logistics, and study of the site. I'm present for all field work and, as much as possible, involved with each of the project scientists' research. The lead scientist on the project is Dr. Russell Shapiro, PhD. He's from CSU Chico. He's a professor and the chair of the CSU Chico Department of Geological and Environmental Sciences. Dr. Shapiro has been involved with the project since early after the original discovery. He brings an extremely strong fieldwork and research background and collaborates with an extensive network of contributing experts. So I want to brag a little bit on our cadre of scientists. We have 7 scientists and outreach to about a dozen more. This group consists of professors and paleontologists who, for the most part, are volunteering their time, expertise, and personal resources to further the study. My 2 most regular partners while doing field work are a paleontologist and zoologist, and a paleontologist and geologist who, between them, literally have about a century of experience as professors in science. So EBMUD has developed a partnership with CSU Chico on this project. Chico State is the institution through which the fossils are undergoing primary study. And I would also like to mention Environmental Science Associates, or ESA, which is an environmental contractor that assisted with the initial site assessment. That's when Dr. Shapiro originally got involved, and also specimen recovery early in the project. Next slide. On July 18th, while out on the McCullamy watershed, I happened upon a fossilized tree. This petrified tree, as you see pictured here, is partially encased in its burial sediments. On following days, I located numerous additional trees, at which time I made outreach to geologists who confirmed what I was observing. Next slide. As I expounded my ground survey, I located the first vertebrate mammal fossils on August 6th. Next slide. Here, pictured, you will see a large limb bone, which upon later excavation turns out to be from a young proboscidean, which is an elephant-like mammal. The photo on the left is the bone as I found it. The photo on the right is the bone during excavation, and this is one of the typical processes we use, where we actually excavate out and leave the bone in a pedestal of the sedimentary matrix that it was located in. At this point, I contacted a paleontologist friend who suggested that the site was of high importance and should be investigated by a scientific professional. Between this point and the time of Dr. Shapiro's first site visit, I located dozens of significant bone fossils. Upon Shapiro's first visit on September 3rd, his assessment was that this is a fossil deposit of high scientific importance. Next slide. Geology and paleontology go hand in hand. Dates of fossil deposits are often tied to the known dates of the sediments in which they are buried. And actually, sometimes it's the other way around. Our site is getting considerable study of its complicated geology. The dating of the sediments is called geochronology, and is a study that's being conducted by Dr. Montana Hodges of Sierra College and Sierra Nevada University, as well as Dr. Todd Green from Chico State and Dr. Shapiro. Next slide. We need to back up one, please. Slide 8. There we go.
Too fast.
Maybe you don't want to be on that one. This is the slide that'll probably put you to sleep. So slide 8. There we go, right there. So pay attention. This will be on the exam later, this information here. So maybe going back to your high school earth science class, but real quick, this is a geologic time scale, and this represents the last 66 million years, which in geologic time would be like in the last month. The fossil assemblage that we're working with out at our site is in the late Miocene, and you'll see that area represented in the red box on this slide. So we're looking at our fossils roughly in the 5 to 10 million year range. Next slide. So let's get back to the animals, really the star of the show here. So some of the critters we found here, you'll see a rhino. Yes, there were rhinos in North America. They arrived to North America from Asia across the Bering Land Bridge. We found the remains of multiple rhinos of perhaps 2 different genus and species. The presence of rhinos is a good general bottom marker, as it's known from the fossil record that they became extinct in North America approximately 5 million years ago. So in addition to rhinos, our current preliminary list of faunal specimens include gomphotheres, mastodons, horses, camels, tortoise, birds, fish, tapir, pronghorn, and I'm going to put a question mark next to that one. We're not exactly sure yet. We think pronghorn. Mustelid. Mustelids are a family of carnivores, including the marten, weasel, wolverine, badger, and another yet to be identified carnivore, which is possibly a dog. And we've been looking for the dogs out here. We know they were on scene in the Miocene. In particular, the bone-crushing dogs is what we're looking for. They had the place of sort of like hyenas do in the African landscape today. There are many other specimens which are still a mystery to us and awaiting ID. In fact, this early in the study, we have more unknowns than actual IDs. It's possible that we may have species or genus that have not yet before been described by science. To sum it up, this is indeed a scientific site of high importance. Next slide.
Maybe we can get one of those critters named after East Bay Mud.
Tortoise. So we have lots of tortoise specimens. The photo on the left was one of the early discoveries. This is a plastron. The plastron is the bottom armor plating of a tortoise, or the bottom part of the shell. The presence of such reptiles is a good marker of what the climate was. And in this case, in the late Miocene, it was certainly warmer than present day. Next slide. Fish. So I selected this prehistoric salmon artwork to represent our fish. Our fish fossil, we haven't ID'd it yet. We don't know if it's a salmon, but we do know that salmon were in abundance during the late Miocene, including the giant spike-toothed salmon, which is believed to have reached as large as 400 pounds. Next slide. Back to slide 12, please. There we go. So this is our one and only fish fossil. And you'll see Michelle Workman there. Michelle is the East Bay Mud Manager of Fisheries and Wildlife. And I partnered with Michelle on the recovery of that fossil. And technically, this was one of the most challenging excavations we've done, even though it's one of the smaller specimens, due to the fact that the sediment and the fossil itself were extremely delicate. Next slide. Horse. So the photo on the top left you'll see is a horse tooth. The photo on the right is a foot bone or a metatarsal. That's the middle foot bone of a 3-toed horse. And probably the horse that we have there is called Mary Chippus. And the artwork on the bottom is a tour through the evolution or development of horses in North America. And I'm going to tell you a real quick story about horses. Interesting life story of horses. Horses first developed in North America, beginning some 50 million years ago. They then dispersed to Asia and Europe. Some millions of years later, horses became extinct here. Their return to this continent occurred on the ships of Europeans in the mid to late 1500s. Some of those horses escaped and some were traded to Native Americans who developed a unique and robust horse culture. So horses started real small, as you'll see on the left. We're somewhere in the middle, probably with Mary Chippus, and then all the way to the right, you can see modern equus. The next slide, please. So Gomphothir. Gomphothir, ancient Greek word for welded beast. Gomphothirs were an elephant-like proboscidean that had 4 tusks. Members of this extinct family developed separately from the family that became modern elephant. Numerous genus and species of Gomphothirs flourished during the Miocene and the Pliocene, which followed. With numerous Gomphothir parts, we found it's apparent that this creature was well represented at our site. Gomphothirs were roughly the size of the smallest modern Asian elephant, perhaps 6 to 8 feet tall at the shoulders. Next slide. So here, a picture of a Gomphothir specimen, which is in this case still inside of the plaster jacketing. The photo on the left, what you see is a complete lower jaw of a Gomphothir that's in the plaster jacketing. And what's occurring in that photo is it's actually, the specimen is still attached to the ground there. And the jacketing and the plaster and burlap is put over the specimen, and then it's separated from the ground. And in this case, at about 350 pounds, we had to use the McCollum Division backhoe to lift it out and get it in a pickup truck. Next slide. Mastodon. Back to slide 16, please. So the mastodon, which means nipple tooth, is another elephant-like proboscidean, larger than Gomphothir, and with only 2 larger upper tusks. Next slide. So one of our mastodon specimens here, what you're looking at is the skull of a mastodon. This is upside down. So those are upper teeth that are pointing upwards. You'll see one of the tusks that disappears out of the left side of the photo. Now, in the office with me today, I brought in one of those teeth. Actually, it's one of the missing teeth from that skull, which after the slides are done, if we go to full screen, perhaps I can show that. So what's occurring in that photo, that was the morning that I had the scientists come out after I had discovered this specimen, and we've got sheets of paper laying on the ground there to help us identify the teeth. The teeth help tell the story and help us to figure out who's who. And the teeth of the Gomphothir and the teeth of the mastodon are quite different. Next slide, please. So here's a photo of the pit that the tusks were in. So that mastodon skull that I showed you had 2 complete tusks that were about 74 inches long attached to the skull. We took the skull out separate from the tusks. So this pit to excavate the tusks took about 130 person hours of excavation. Those tusks are actually still attached to the ground in this photo. This was moments before we separated the jacket from the ground. You'll see those steel plates getting ready to be driven underneath the specimen. And just an interesting note, we design and build a lot of our own tools, which we use for this type of excavation. So that specimen weighed well into the 300-pound range. We weren't able to use a backhoe at this location because of the slope. It took 8 people to lift that out of the ground and carry it up a hill to a truck. Next slide. Camels. Despite their strong association with the Middle East and Africa, camels actually originated in North America some 45 million years ago. Between 3 and 5 million years ago, they crossed the Bering Land Bridge to Eurasia and eventually migrated south. They also ambled their way south to South America from North America, where they evolved into llamas and alpacas. So this artwork by 19th century artist Heinrich Harter depicts the giraffe-like North American camel called Apicamelus, which means high camel. AP was a browser who could reach up some 20 feet into the trees. Next slide. Out of numerous camel specimens that we've collected, we believe we have found AP camelus as well as another separate genus of camel that we haven't yet ID'd. Those photos you see there are structures of the foot. That upper bone is called a metapodial. That's a foot bone, approximately 45 centimeters long. Camels have 2 toes. They walk on their tippy toes while much of their weight is supported by a cushion pad. The bottom photo is a toe bone from kind of the middle structure of the foot. That's a proximal phalange. Next slide.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, so probably the cutest, arguably the cutest animal in the lineup is our baby tapir. Resembling a pig, tapirs are actually more closely related to rhinos or horses. They're extinct in North America. Modern tapirs exist in Central and South America. If you've been to the San Diego Zoo, you might have seen tapirs there. Next slide, please. Our lone specimen is a fantastically preserved partial jaw with baby teeth that have virtually no wear. The condition of the teeth suggests that this young tapir was still of nursing age. Contemporary tapirs can be quite large, in fact, up to 700 pounds. But this tapir is tiny, not only because it was a baby, but it is a very small species. Professor Charles Daly and I have teamed up on the study of this specimen, and so far we've determined that we may have the smallest yet found Miocene tapir. And I'll have to say genus and species yet unknown. But it appears the next larger Miocene tapir, which is described as a dwarf tapir. We're currently referring to ours as a pygmy dwarf tapir. Next slide. We took our tapir jaw in for its first dental appointment. My personal dentist in Jackson, California is graciously supporting our study by providing high-tech imagery of our specimens. In this photo, you'll see the tapir jaw in the newest 3D CT scanner. This procedure gives us a look inside of the jaw to observe the position of the unerupted adult teeth. We can have exact replicas made of the jaw from the scan data. Next slide. So what happens to the specimens after discovery and collection? Currently, there are several private labs in CSU Chico which are preparing the fossils. After study at Chico State, the fossils will go to the University of California Museum of Paleontology on the UC Berkeley campus, and that will be their final repository. EBMUD owns the fossils forever. Select specimens will likely return to the district for our educational and display purposes. And particular specimens, we can have 3D printed or resin models created. Next slide. So quick photo. This is my home lab, my ski tuning shop, and half of my garage as well have been converted for fossil preparation. During prep, the fossils are removed from remaining burial sediments and stabilized for further study. Measurements, photography, and some ID investigation also occurs at this point. I want to make a special note to my lovely wife for putting up with this adventure. With half of the garage taken up with pallets of fossils and her missing Tupperware and things like that. She's been a real trooper through this. Next slide. So site management, security is really important. And for the foreseeable future, the site will be secured and patrolled. Long-term plans include to continue with survey, recovery, and study. The fossils will be examined by particular experts who are partnering with our team. We've had focus on the mammal and reptile fossils, but we do plan to expand the study of the paleobotany, which is of the tree and plants. And we do have a lot of tree and plant fossils and leaf fossils, which are also very important to tell the story of evolution and climate in California. Also, more focus on geochronology, again, which is the science of dating the sediments. It's very likely that scientific papers will be written and published. So education, the paleontology story will be included by ranger staff for interpretive content, such for programs such as RLEAP, which is the ranger-led environmental education program. Undergrad and graduate student fieldwork in geology and paleontology through US Chico or CSU Chico will probably take place. In particular, in the near future, there's a grad student who will be conducting geological fieldwork as part of his master's thesis. And the post-field study is now greatly enhanced by Dr. Shapiro's recruitment of 4 CSU students who will work with our fossils at the on-campus Gateway Museum. These students are part of the CSC Squared, or Chico STEM Connections Collaborative, which is a program that provides support, resources, and research opportunities to Chico State's underrepresented students. Next slide. So I'd like to finish up with a thank you to McCollum Division staff, former manager Chris Swan, current manager Chuck Beckman, and Mike Toglanini for all of the support and the flexibility. This is a project that's a little out of the ordinary for us. And I wanted to show a couple of specimens. I was mentioned in the mastodon tooth. So this is a partial upper molar to give you some scale on how big these teeth are. So that skull that you looked at in that photograph, it had some missing teeth. This is one of the missing teeth that I found deeper down in the pit.
Whoa.
That's huge.
And
so cool.
tusk fragment. This is a fragment of a lower, presumably a lower tusk from one of the Gomphotheres.
Awesome.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Is there a board tour of the fossil site coming up at any point in the not too distant future?
We could possibly arrange that, and the timing would maybe be important. If we have a particular specimen that we're working to get out of the ground, there might be something more interesting to see in that case. But we can talk further about that. That would be my pleasure to have you out.
This is very, very, very cool. I just love this.
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps if we do the upcountry barbecue this year, it could be tied in to our time up there.
Great idea.
How much longer do you think there'll be digging going on, Greg?
It's hard to say, but perhaps for a while. I would say at least maybe coming months to a year.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad to get the chance to update you.
That's great.
Mike wanted to say a few words.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out and thank Greg Franczyk for this presentation and all the work he's been doing. Most of the work that you're seeing the results of have been done on a voluntary basis by all the scientists, and in particular by Greg, who has spent countless hours on his days off out on the site, finding new fossil specimens and doing a lot of the behind-the-scenes work on a voluntary basis. So I just want to acknowledge and thank Greg for all the work he's been doing.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mike.
Excellent.
That's it for the general manager's report, President Lee.
All right, thank you very much. Greg, special thanks to you and your team on that, and what a great discovery. Okay, let me find my agenda here. I think we're at the, yeah, let's track of my agenda. Just a second here.
It's just amazing.
I think our board comments, Doug.
Committee reports, actually.
Committee reports, that'll.
So the Sustainability Committee met this morning at bright and early at 9 a.m. to hear the annual integrated pest management report and our efforts to reduce herbicide and other pesticide use on district lands and facilities, and had some helpful comments from the public, and are making a small tweak to the policy around posting notices, and it was a good discussion.
All right, thank you. Finance?
Yes, Finance Committee met this morning. It was an exciting meeting. Many of the items that we had were passed on, and you have approved them. They included the monthly investment transaction report, the annual investment policy review, the quarterly financial report, the extended authorization of short-term indebtedness, which you did, the customer supply program funding, exciting to see that happen, and a review of district policies. Randy did a good job of that. So those are the things that have come to your attention later in the meeting as a full board, and we're over the hump. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Bill. Any items for future consideration, please submit those to the general manager. Are there any other director comments?
I wanted to flag this weekend's, actually two things. One, this weekend I'm going on a little tour of the secret, or I call it the secret garden, but I don't think that's what it's actually called, up in our watershed, where we have an abundance of native plants in a intersecting biome. But then I am going to participate in the May Day parade, march, celebration that is happening in San Francisco, with a particular focus on immigration, in keeping with our earlier item. Will be definitely uplifting the equity and racism issues related to all of our many of our immigrant communities.
Great, thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I wanted just to report that Channel 2 did a nice characterization on Saturday, and the voices of change. And those of you who remember Rue Mapp and her sister, Delane, they had all of their group in the park, walking the trails, and being photographed as a return to nature Afro program, which has gained national accord. And I was just happy to see that, and see the East Bay Park exhibited. And it was in some of the areas that we maintain and operate. That's it.
That's great. Thank you, Bill.
Add one other thing. I got last week, had the opportunity to, or last week, this week, last week, I took part in the tour that staff put on to show mainly folks from Orinda, but really anybody that wanted to participate, our efforts to manage fuels in the watershed. And it was terrific. Scott Hill and his team are doing a fantastic job. And I think it really helped folks that have been very concerned in Orinda about the large pine die-off to understand more fully our approach to managing the watershed and protecting surrounding communities from the threat of fire, as well as obviously our water quality. So it was very well done, and I learned a lot, and I hope that there's some materials that will be coming out from it to help share it with others.
I'll just add that I had an opportunity to be on the Robert Harris's show All About Community earlier this month, and talked for almost an hour about East Bay Mud and questions and things like that, and enjoyed that. And I believe that's available on YouTube and other places as well, if anybody's interested. There's things that you don't know about East Bay Mud that I do know. All right. With that then, our next regular meeting of the board will be held on Tuesday, May 11th at 1:15, and this meeting is now adjourned.